Who's Behind the Great Food Reset? This is by James Corbett of the Corbett Report, January 23rd, 2023. Last week we looked at the ways that an engineered food crisis, or the perception of a crisis, is being used as an excuse to re-engineer our food supply, from cricket powder dumplings and bug burger to GMOs and glyphosate to bioreactors and designer microbes to nutriogenics, genomics, and 3D printed material. The future of food is shaping up to be a radically different from anything you've eaten before. But in order to truly do something to derail the runaway train of the Great Reset for food, we must first understand it. And in order to understand it, we have to know something about the people behind this agenda. This week, we must answer the question, who is behind the Great Food Reset? The Rockefeller Foundation. The Rockefeller family and their namesake foundation are in many ways the progenitors and architects of the Great Food Reset. In fact, the very term agribusiness emerged from Harvard Business School out of research conducted by Wassily Leontief under Rockefeller Foundation grant. From the beginning of the so-called Green Revolution to the so-called Gene Revolution, the Rockefellers have been there helping to move things along with their philanthropic donations. They created the Mexican Agricultural Program, which was criticized from its very inception for trying to standardize and commercialize traditional Mexican farming practices in order to benefit the Rockefellers and their corporate cronies. They created the International Basic Economic Corporation in Brazil to industrialize that nation's agricultural sector with the implicit aim of hooking its farmers on expensive machinery and Rockefeller petroleum products and finding a sustainable business model in the process. It was John D. Rockefeller III who, when sitting on the board of trustees of the Ford Foundation, convinced his fellow oligarchs to join the Green Revolution by founding the Intensive Agricultural District Program in India, which exacerbated the disparity between the rich feudal landlords and poor farming peasants. And then, of course, there was the Rockefellers' work in Africa, which today takes the form of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. AGRA's stated goal is to elevate the single African voice on the world stage. It all sounds nice and fuzzy until you learn that 200 organizations have come together to denounce the Alliance and its activities. They claim that the group has not only unequivocally failed in its mission, but has actually harmed broader efforts to support African farmers. As you imagine, the Rockefellers' influence over the global agricultural sector is not simply a thing of the past. Their family's foundation continues to wield an inordinate amount of power over what ends up on your dinner plate and how it gets there. One ominous case in point, the Foundation's July 2020 report, released mere months into the academic or scandemic, predicting that the generated health crisis would lead to a very real food crisis and that America would face a hunger and nutritional crisis unlike any this country has seen in generations. And their proposed solution to this crisis? Subsidies for smaller farmers, development of community gardens, a new food sovereignty campaign encouraging people to get their hands dirty and start growing more food themselves? Of course not. On the contrary, the Rockefeller Foundation wants a further centralization of the control over the food supply, including a new integration nutritional security system. Yes, you read that right, folks. Feeding the hungry is now a nutritional security problem that can only be solved by massive federal intervention in the food sector. Oh, and the title of this report? Reset the Table, Meeting the Moment to Transform the U.S. Food System. So no, the Rockefeller Foundation has not done meddling with the food supply. In fact, they're just getting started. Bill Gates, given Bill Gates' 2009 admission that he had looked to the Rockefeller Foundation as an example to follow in helping his son set up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, noting not just the Rockefellers' influence in the field of global health, but also specifically citing their work in agriculture and farming. It's no surprise Bill Gates Jr. is now so heavily invested in the Great Food Reset. Of course, he's literally invested in the food reset through the financing of the fake meat industry. Gates was infamously an important early backer of Impossible Burger and its lab-grown synthetic biological food substitute. He also provided capital to Impossible rival Beyond Meat, but until Beyond Meat stock began to crumble, miraculously the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust was able to divest itself of its Beyond Meat stock right before the share tanked in 2019. The Gateses must be super shrewd investors, but it gets worse. As Please Stop the Ride has pointed out, Gates is also investing millions into hacking your microbiome to re-engineer humans' gut bacteria. You see, as it turns out, researchers are discovering that the microbiome, the mixture of bacteria, fungi, and viruses that develop in the gut, can have serious effects on children's physical and mental development, especially in the first year of life. And what does Gates do when he sees an important process that can help him to gain even further control over the human population? Hack it, naturally. But it's for your own good, of course. Also, as many people know by now, Bill Gates became the biggest owner of U.S. farmland in 2021. Gee, I wonder why someone who's so obsessed with completely re-engineering the food supply and making us dependent on the lab-grown synthetic food substitutes he funds would be buying up farmland. A real head-scratcher, that one. Speaking of head-scratchers, just why is Bill so passionate about pushing fake meat on the public, and why, anyway? To appease the weather gods, of course. Speaking of fake meat, World Economic Forum, unless you've been living under a rock, you'll have heard of the Eat the Bugs agenda by now. You know the now ubiquitous propaganda campaign to stop eating meat and start eating insects in the name of what else? Saving the planet. But if by chance you were living under the rock, you would not know that what's called the Eat the Bugs agenda. Conspiracy realists, however, will be able to clue you in. It's a dishonor of everyone's favorite Bond villain reject, Klaus Schwab, the founder of the executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. Yes, the WEF is behind many different aspects of the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution, and Eat the Bugs agenda is now no exception. Never forget, it was Schwab who popularized the Great Reset rebranding of the very old New World Order idea, and Schwab's desire to get humans off the traditional sources of protein and nutrients is very much a part of the Great Reset plan. A quick search of the word insects on WEF websites reveal that it has been regularly promoted such hard-hitting journalistic pieces as 5 reasons why eating insects could reduce climate change, why we need to give insects the role they deserve in our food systems, insects could soon be appearing on restaurants' menus in Europe, and good grub, why we might be eating insects soon. The fat cats are now unwinding after their hard week at Davos. You can bet they're not snacking down on cricket croquet or meal mouth flambe, though they may expect you to. But the Davos despots had better watch their backs. It turns out that they have competition. The Eat Forum, Davos for Food. The Eat Forum is an organization co-founded by the Wellcome Trust. Yes, that Wellcome Trust. It emerged from the Stockholm Food Forum, a by-invitation only conference on the business, science, and politics of food production that is sometimes billed as the Davos for Food. Never heard of Eat? It's about page reads like the usual corporate whitewash. Eat is a nonprofit dedicated to transforming our global food system through sound science, impatient disruption, and novel partnerships. But if the very idea of a Davos for Food puts you off your lunch, and Eat founder and executive chairman Gunhild Stordalen gives you some strong Lieutenant Ilya vibes, then you might want to take a look at Dr. Joseph Mercola's assessment of the group in his article on the global technocrat cabal. The EAT Forum's largest initiative is called FRESH, which aims to transform the food system as a whole. Project partners in this venture include Bayer, Cargill, Syngenta, Unilever, and Google. EAT also collaborates with nearly 40 city governments in Europe, Africa, Asia, North America, South America, and Australia, and helps the Gates Foundation, United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, create updated dietary guidelines. Given a pedigree like that, you'd expect that EAT Forum Advisory Board to be stacked with globalist insiders and career super gophers for the world elite. You'd be right. Unsurprisingly, among its many initiatives is Shifting Urban Diets, a plan to demonstrate how scientific targets for food systems can be operationalized in the city's context by adopting the Lancet's Planetary Health Diet, a WEF-promoted response to climate change hysteria that says you should eat meat, you should eat more vegetables to stop hurricanes, or something like that. Yes, the EAT Forum may not have crossed your radar yet, but if its track record, ambition to become the Davos for food, and connections to similarly every globalist insider and crony corporation in the industrial food system indicate anything, we'll be hearing a lot more about this group in the near future. Next is US aid. Remember last week when I discussed Henry Kissinger's 1974 plan to start using foreign aid as a weapon to encourage developing countries to start sterilizing their population? Well then, it won't shock you to learn that another organization with its hands on the great food reset pie is USAID. Yes, that USAID. The Board for International Food and Agriculture Development, BIFAD, is, according to USAID's website, a 7-member presidentially appointed advisory board to USAID established in 1975 under the Title 12 of the Foreign Assistance Act as amended to ensure that USAID brings the assets of U.S. universities to bear on development challenges in agriculture and food security, and supports their representations in USAID programs. Last year, BIFAD, in conjunction with Feed the Future, the U.S. government's global health, hunger, and food security initiative, released a working paper titled Systemic Solutions for Climate Change Adaptation and Mitigation. And the paper argues that a perfect storm of circumstances in which supply chains issues, regional and agriculture nutrition challenges, the ongoing effects of COVID-19 pandemic, and regional conflict have combined to form a looming food security crisis. After shoehorning in some climate change hysteria for good measure, they call for you, guess it, to a complete transformation of the food supply and global agriculture. Specifically, BIFAD's Systemic Change Subcommittee has been tasked with providing evidence-based recommendations to accelerate inclusive systems change to achieve transformative climate change adaptation and mitigation outcomes in agriculture, nutrition, and food systems. The subcommittee's proposal for achieving this ambitious goal include linking carbon markets to regenerative agriculture, hence the financialization of nature that is all the rage of globalist circles these days, using ESG scores as a way to pressure companies into acquiescence to the vague, nebulous, and ever-shifting demands of the food reset mafia, and of course the promotion of insects as sustainable sources of protein. The whole document is conducted in the bland bureaucratic double-speaking of equity, inclusion, and sustainability. Of course, that avoids delving too deeply into the specifics of the fundamental transformation of the food system that BIFAD is ostensibly investigating. But if you know how to read between the lines, it is not hard to understand that the report is really saying USAID's leverage over developing countries, specifically referring no less than 125 times gives an insight into the Kissinger food as a weapon mentality that is the very basis of USAID in its mission. The entire enterprise reeks of a neo-colonial land grab masquerading as philanthropy, the kind of territorial taking that the people in Africa and elsewhere have been warning about for decades. And what can we do? The list of great food reset culprits is of course incomplete. I have not even mentioned the participants of the food chain reaction game or the nitrogen reduction schemes being pushed by national governments around the world, or the Global Crop Diversity Trust and its ominous laugh-barred seed vault, or any of the million other relevant players and factors in the grand transformation. But from this admittedly incomplete exploration, we can derive a general understanding of the types of players that are behind this push to transform the global food supply and can accurately describe their methods and motivation. This is enough for us to start formulating our own plans for counteracting this agenda, and that is the topic for next week. This is from Truth Comes to Light, and it's on Out of Mind 2, by James Corbett, The Corbett Report. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box